The Capitals add free agency next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, free agency is tomorrow, Tuesday, July 1st. And a lot of questions still surround this team. Some questions have already been answered. I'll talk about that a bit later. We'll talk about RFA moves and the youth movement. Isn't it interesting? For the longest time, this team was revered as one of the older teams in the NHL roster-wise. What has changed? A bit later, we'll talk about flexibility and forward focus. That there are certain positions and certain players penciled into those positions. But the good thing about the Capitals this season, as they have flexibility, but just to get it going here, talking about free agency starts tomorrow. And some teams are already coming out swinging. And if you take a look, the biggest one, of course, is Mitch Marner going out to the Vegas Golden Knights. Talk about a team that just continues to build with upper echelon, bigger name players every year, bigger than the year before. That team seems to be stacked and poised to do great things, at least on paper. Not always the case. See the Predators, for example, one. Also, Brad Marchand re-upping with the Panthers. Ekblad re-upping with the Panthers. That the teams that were good are getting that much better. And those are just the big ones that come to mind. And to be clear here, I don't think the Capitals have any of those kind of moves up their sleeve, nor do I think it's a necessity or necessary. You take a look at the Golden Knights, that's just kind of their blueprint, is to go out and just amass and try to get every big name player they possibly can. And much respect to them, to be able to have that kind of pull that you can reel in a Mitch Marner, these kind of players, that definitely a team that's attractive to a lot of different players. But the Capitals, what have they done? I think it's important to reflect back and look how much different the team is now compared to where they were last year, where many people had panned them for not doing great things. And former GM Brian MacLellan said he was going to make some big moves. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, that's what he says. Big moves. Okay, guy. He came out swinging with the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal and all the moves that followed after that, that this team is in a much better position, that maybe they don't need to go out and try to, just get these big name players that's going to put this team in the hole and ultimately block some of their top prospects that are on their way up. So let's dive into that in segment 1 here, kind of reflecting back on the Capitals and how much better they are this season than they were the same time last season. And last season, the Caps were deep in transformation mode. Like they weren't just rearranging chairs on the Titanic. They were flipping the whole ship around in a span of, 2 weeks? The Capitals added 7 veteran players to this team. Some of them bigger than others, of course, but those players that were added really changed the chemistry and the outlook of this team. So big things, adding a lot of players in a short span of time made a big difference. And remember back, those moves people said that the Capitals made, didn't think it was going to make them competitors. I guess we proved them wrong. That summer, overhaul gave the franchise a full-on injection of youth and energy, and the right thing. And why? How is it made possible? We know Backstrom, Oshie, LTIR, Kuznetsov, off to the next one, that it presented a unique opportunity, some cap space for the Capitals to go out and acquire some players. And what did they do? the proof's in the pudding. They improved by 20 points in the standings, made the playoffs, and finally won their first playoff series since 2018, making it past the first round since 2018. Now, fast forward to right now, July 1st, free agency eve. And I'll talk about some of the moves or contracts that were signed by the Capitals for some players that were already here. But big moves. And, you got to kind of just stick with it. I know that the official start is tomorrow, but there's a lot going on right now. Big names. Some of them are staying with their team. In the case of Mitch Marner on the move, a lot of moving pieces, but the Caps are going to be way less chaotic this season. But don't, mix it up here. They're still active. They got some holes to plug, and they've got around $9 million in cap space to work with. How do I think they plan on using that? I think that they try to come to terms, if possible, to sign an extension to Connor McMichael and Marty Faravari. But they also, the additions of Justin Sourdif and Declan Chisholm, and I'll talk about them in a bit here, that they're adding smaller pieces, but not to undersell them or diminish those kind of players. I think that they are the right kind of players to not really long-term deals, like I said, that are going to block prospects in the pipeline. But talking about Sourdif and Chisholm, together those moves took care of two key areas. Let's start with Sourdif, young guy, fits the bill. This team that's getting younger, 23-year-old winger acquired from the Cats. Cheap cap hit $825K. 4 years younger than Taylor Radish and cheaper too. He's penciled in on right side with Dowd and Duhaime on paper. To me, solid fit. We'll see at camp, though. And later I'll talk about in the show. We know the young prospects that are on their way up. And then there's Declan Chisholm, 2 years, $3.2 million, brought in to help the decor, especially with Faravari's injury history. He played 66 games for the Wild last year. Strong puck mover. Again, the Capitals do not want to go into the postseason next year or just into next season in general without the needed depth at the defensive position. So all things considered, two really great pickups. Again, not sexy names, names that are going to be like, oh my God, they got Sourdif and Chisholm. Man, you can pencil their name on the side of the Stanley Cup, or etch it, I guess, in the side of the Stanley Cup. Not the case, but those kind of moves that I think are going to solidify positions of need. And these are smart depth move, right? You're not blowing up your cap on overpriced vets, but you're adding players that can contribute. That's the big thing. It's fun to talk about Mitch Marner. If you're a Golden Knights fan, you're like, oh, yawn. We picked up another great player again. Oh, it's just what we do out here in Sin City. And the Florida Panthers, a team that 5-6 years ago was not much of anything, is just back-to-back Stanley Cups and seems to do no wrong. That's working for them. The Capitals are a different team, and I don't think they need to go down that road. But talking money here, nickels and dimes, speaking of the cap, the Capitals do have some money to spend. Like I said, around $9 million, and that is going to be interesting to see how it manifests itself. Do they, in fact, try to go out and get a bigger name fish? I know a lot of the bigger ones have been spoke for, but there's more out there. Again, I think the Capitals will continue in doing moves similar to the Justin Sourdif and Declan Chisholm. There might be a little bit of an upper echelon in there, but definitely I don't think any kind of Marner-ish type of deal out there. And I don't think the Capitals need to do that. I mean, you take a look at it. Were they good enough to make it past the second round last year? No, but they were good enough to make it further than they did the year before. And, to be honest with you, you could add Marner to the Capitals right now. The guy doesn't play really good in the postseason. I don't know if you know that. And Marchand, Marchand is Marchand. And, he definitely added some juice to the Panthers. There is no doubt. But, like I talked about, sometimes you go and you get the bigger name players. Again, referencing Nashville last year, and on paper, they seem to be destined to do great things. Not so much the case that it has to all fit. It has to be the right coach, the right players. I think the Capitals are in an excellent position right now. Again, I would love to talk to you about a big name acquisition, but I don't think the Capitals need to, spend exorbitant amount of money to bring in players that are just going to be let's bask in the glory of Mitch Marner. I just don't think that's the case. The Capitals already have a great team. They have prospects and great players lined up to make this team even better. than it was last season. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about flexibility and forward focus. Listen, we have Connor McMichael kind of already penciled in at that third line center position, but then there's Hendrix Lapierre. The Capitals have something they haven't had in quite some time: flexibility. I'll discuss next. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in the same game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. Wah, wah, wah. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups. I'm a big Nats fan, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So if you are a Nationals fan, if you're an Orioles fan, or say you want vested interest in any of these games, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on these games. All of a sudden, they got much more exciting. So are you new to FanDuel? New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So talking about stability, talking about options, that the Capitals don't have limited options. They have options available at multiple positions that say option A doesn't work. Maybe option B will work. And I think what the Capitals plan on doing on free agency is they plan on addressing the third line. I think they will pick up some more players. They very well might go out and get the perceived third line center, because Connor McMichael, maybe, Hendrix Lapierre, maybe. I don't think the Capitals want to risk going into next season with any more maybes. So let's talk about that in segment 2 here, because even with Sourdif and Chisholm locked in, the Caps still have 2 or 3 roster spots to fill. Again, it's not over yet. They've got options, especially because of Connor McMichael. He wants to move back to center, his native position, and that's big. McMichael had a breakout year last season, we know, and if he plays down the middle there, well, it frees up room on the wings. And it's his native position. And he said in a post-game presser, or post-breakdown presser there, that he would like to get back to the center position. Of course, he's going to play wherever the coach puts him in, but that's where he excels. That's where he has a long history. Chris Patrick spoke about that flexibility, saying they're looking for a skilled forward, either winger or a center. And that gives them a good option. So if the Capitals can acquire a similar player that has a history at center and a good history at center, because the Capitals already have their own internal options, it would have to be an upgrade and a guy that, if it doesn't work out center, can play wing. Kind of like Connor McMichael, but someone else. I think that that'll be the case. And I also think they're going to try to address the players around him. You know, you saw Ryan Leonard there. You've seen other players mix and match on that third line. I really think that is what I would do. If I was Chris Patrick, I would take care of it. I would get players that I can pencil in. And if for some reason they don't work out, don't, give them exorbitant contracts, just give them a decent amount. And then if those players don't work out, then you have the younger options. You do not want to go into next season putting all your chips in the young basket. I'm talking Miro, I'm talking Cristall, not proven NHL performers yet. Something to consider. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, take a look at Leonard. Sometimes these guys don't shoot to the moon. It takes a little bit of work. So I'm all hyped on Cristall. I'm hyped on Miro. I'm hyped on Ilya Protas. But I think that they need to add some more sure things, in quotes, before they go into next season. But a quote here, maybe that skilled forward is Mikey. Maybe we find out and keep him on the wing, unquote. We saw him kill it. Second line, left wing with PLD. Hey, I mean, if it doesn't work at center, I'm not too bummed about it. Connor McMichael might be, but at the end of the day, I think that he's fine with it. That's the game plan. Options. And with guys like Strome, Dubois, and Dowd already down the middle, the Caps can shift things around. Strome's got it buttoned up on the first line, PLD, the second, which I think that he could play on the top if for some reason, if they wanted to shake up the snow globe a little bit. And Nick Dowd stirs the drink on the fourth line. I think they're in a good position. Now, president of hockey ops, Brian MacLellan, backed that up too. He said the team needs skill up front, but they're also watching the younger guys, which I spoke of, Leonard, Miro, and Cristall. And the unique position this year, or the advantageous position for the Capitals, is, of course, if Cristall, for some reason, doesn't work out, doesn't make the final cut, he can also be down in Hershey, kind of get right whatever's perceived to be wrong, and then he can shoot back up. That's at least how things are penciled in my mind, and I think to a certain extent, Chris Patrick's mind. Miro, same story goes. I'm reluctant to put all my eggs in his basket as well. Why? Last season, on the team, up and down and up and down. And he's getting used to North American hockey and this and that I want to believe it's this season for Miro. And I think the Capitals will definitely give the youth a chance. But you need contingency plans if that doesn't work. You don't want the next season to be a loss because you put all of your chips in on these young players and they don't pan out. That is why they need some proven performers. Maybe re-up Anthony Beauvillier if Mangiapane and Radish are on to the next one. Find similar players, but upgrades, if you will, from those players. I think that would be key. The thing to remember here, of course, is they don't want to block those prospect players with overpaid UFAs. Don't get drawn into that. I think that there are some names that get you excited. Those are names I recognize, and those players are really exciting. Maybe, I pump the brakes and tamper expectations there a little bit. They might be upgrades. But the one thing the Capitals don't want to do is give UFAs like that 4-year deals. Because you take a look at it, the UFA market this year, super thin, not a ton of game changers. And, as giddy and as excited as everyone is in the NHL right now, the fans of NHL, Mitch Marner is not a proven performer in the postseason. Okay, you can make the argument that it's just the Maple Leafs and they don't know how to play postseason hockey. It will be very interesting to see what he does in Vegas. Maybe he'll just, really take his game to the next level. A great player, don't get me wrong, an amazing player, but not a proven postseason performer. So the Caps might try the trade route, but here's the thing. Other teams know the Caps pipeline is strong. So when they call, they're asking about Cristals and Miros, and the Caps not eager to give up those guys, nor should they be. A player that I would not be surprised to see on the move tomorrow, I don't think this should come as any surprise, is Hendrix Lapierre. I know that he's going to get the kick at the can, if you will, but I think that if they get the right offer, I think that, to a certain extent that their patience with him has kind of come to an end. So I think there's going to be some moving pains. I really don't expect the Capitals to move the likes of Cristall, Miro, Leonard, those kind of guys, Ilya Protas, Cole Hudson, these kind of guys, kind of the untouchable prospects. I've spoke about, if you're an everydayer on the show, tiers of prospects. Some players I don't think they would do because this team is in a unique position this year to be truly built it's built for years to come, to be a knockout year after year after year. They're not in this win now mode that we've seen before, where they're trying to squeeze as much juice out of the Rock the Red era that they can. That was Peter Laviolette hockey. They tried it. It didn't work. Now ushering in the younger age. And I think that's where we're at. The Capitals are going to take a step forward with younger players this year, but you're going to see that progression even after Alex Ovechkin hangs up the skates, those kind of things, that this team is going to look totally different in a couple of years than what you see today, and a much better team, in my opinion. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about RFA moves and the youth movement. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in the final segment here, we're talking about RFA moves and the youth movement. Listen, we heard Sourdif. He got an extension. We heard about Chisholm. He got an extension. So two players that were brought in, not just Band-Aids. They're going to be here for a while. And that feels good for me that these players that, you had to give up some draft picks for these kind of things, that they will be here for a while. And, the more you look into it, sound logic there. You heard Chris Patrick talking about Sourdif, where why did they have to give up a couple draft picks? Well, there was other teams out there that were offering to give up one draft pick. So the Capitals had to kind of add a sweetener, if you will. So that is why things went the way that it did. And I think the hard part about it is that I think that, you can kind of get competitive with it, like a bidding war. Like, I'm going to one up you. You're going to put up this. I'm going to put up that. And at the end of the day, you're like, okay, you're really doing all that over kind of an unknown. But again, trust me, the more you look into it, Sourdif is a great deal. And I think that he is going to add stability to the fourth line, again, penciled in, or the third line, whatever the case might be. But good additions. And the youth movement, the two young players, which I spoke of, Sourdif and Chisholm, and the young prospects, like I spoke about in the second segment, the future of Hendrix Lapierre. He could get dealt tomorrow. I think that's the case. Hendrix Lapierre qualified, still in the fold for now. That is what I'm going to say for now. The hard part with Hendrix Lapierre is every year we go in with the feeling that it's going to be his year, and then it's not. And then he goes down to Hershey and does really well. But then when he gets his opportunity again, never makes the most of it. And I wonder how long the patience of Capitals fans and the Capitals brass is going to be with Hendrix Lapierre. What you're looking at here is a bridge deal, 1-year deal if they give him an extension, and a prove-it deal. Make us believe that you deserve to be a Capital. That's the big thing. But the bigger news here, players not qualified. I'm talking about Pierrick Dubé, Alexeyev, and Mitchell Gibson. But Mitchell Gibson, you got to listen. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's not what it sounds like. But Pierrick Dubé, again, last season, the season before the Capitals, or more the season before that, the Capitals were really all in. He even had a cup of coffee with the Capitals, got a call-up, very limited, but did not flash. It was just kind of like a brief burst and then went away. Put up big goals in Hershey in that season. But again, there's only so many roster spots, and either they're going to work, you have kind of a vision where they're going to fit, or try to get something for him. So let's dive into that here. Lapierre is interesting. He made the roster out of camp last fall, but couldn't hold down that 3C role. We know that. Got sent back to Hershey, and to his credit, he dominated. Point per game guy, a big part of that Calder Cup run. That's something I'm never going to take away from him. I'm not trying to skew your opinion on him. I get it that he can perform with the Hershey Bears in the American League. Why can he not do it in the NHL? That is what has me concerned as a Capitals fan. Chris Patrick said he's probably headed for a bridge deal. Like I said, makes sense. It's a prove-it time now for Lappy. As far as Alexeyev is concerned, this I could go into conspiratorial waters. If you are a fan of this show, if you're an everydayer, I spoke about his extracurricular criminal activity, that's public record. I'm not saying a thing out of turn here, that the Capitals do not like the optics of that. And I'm not saying that's what swayed their opinion. I think the bigger thing is he didn't truly perform in the postseason, but all of that extracurricular activity definitely did not do him any favors. This organization really doesn't like that kind of activity. Again, I'm not saying that's the reason why. I'm just saying that something to let roll around in your head there. Now, the hard part, and I've heard about this from Capitals fans, first round pick in 2018, just never really stuck. And, he was given opportunities, but then sometimes those opportunities were taken away from him. If we think back to when Joel Edmondson was acquired, that before he was acquired, the feeling was that it was going to be Alexeyev's turn. But then Joel Edmondson set him back. His progress, that is. And then he's also dealt with injuries. So it's not all on him. But you take a look at this last season, scratched most of the year, and even in the playoffs didn't do much to stand out. That's the thing. You need to make the most of your opportunities. He is the guy that had teeth knocked out and went back in. Hey, listen, you should have some stripes on your jersey for that. Mad respect. I get that. But that's not it, So the Caps are letting him walk. No bad feelings. Just didn't work out. Honestly, I wish Alexeyev nothing but the best. I hope he kills it on whatever team he goes to. I really sincerely mean that. Next, Dubé had a strong AHL season, earned a brief call-up, but couldn't separate from the pack. He'll hit the UFA market as well. Remember him getting called up a year or so ago, and just never really flashed. That's the thing. But to get to Gibson, I've already had a flurry of people saying, well, wait, I thought he was going to be a Capital. What happened? Let me clarify here. Gibson did not get a qualifying offer, but the Hershey Bears did lock him up to an AHL deal. So he sticks in the organization, just not an NHL contract. So, I don't know how many people, there are some Cap nerds like me out there that really read into this, and some casual Cap fans like Gibson, who? He is another prospect in the Capitals goalie pipeline. I would have been bummed, I guess, to an extent if he walked. I understand that the pipeline is jam-packed, but just to add some clarity to those murky waters that he has an AHL deal, just not a qualifying offer from the big team. So meanwhile, let's talk about the youth movement. Ryan Leonard is going to play next season. His college days are done. We're going to get a good look at him right out of the gate. He's going to have a full camp. He's going to have a full season. I expect exponential growth from Ryan Leonard. I am not judging that brief snippet that we saw from him at the tail end of the season. I talk about it. Hindsight is 2020, rear view mirror, all that kind of stuff. That I think that I understand what the Capitals were thinking about putting him in the playoffs, thinking that he could give them that extra jump. Didn't really do that. Nothing against him. It was just kind of an experiment that I'm not going to say failed, but hindsight maybe wasn't the right idea. In any event, he's going to play next year, and I expect big growth. Miro should take the next step up as well. Potentially could earn a spot on this team. Those are the things to consider. So you take a look at the players that could be on the way out, Mangiapane, Radish, Eller, Beauvillier, potentially, that this could present an opportunity for Miro if they decide to go in that direction. And then Cristall and even Ilya Protas is kind of knocking at the door as well, right? Alexei's knocking it out of the park, but Ilya is no slouch either. Cristall absolutely destroyed it. Spokane Chiefs, if you didn't know, check it out. Just really excelled. At the time when he got cut from the roster, I felt kind of like, what are they doing here? I understood entry-level deal, couldn't play, 8-9 games, and he burned his first year of his entry-level deal. I get all that. It was the right thing for him to go back to Kelowna, and then he got dealt out to Spokane. His game just grew that much more, so I like it. But exciting players, Leonard, Miro, Cristall, and Ilya Protas, players that could be on the rise. And let's not forget about Vinny Iorio. Another guy that's kind of charting into those waters perennially, year after year. It's going to be his year. It's not his year. I think that Vinny Iorio needs to take big steps forward this year. He's kind of another guy that's entering into that thing where we always hear it's going to be his year, and there's so much talent on the blue line down in Hershey. Those are the things that are getting drawn into focus. Now, you take a look at this. This team is building towards 2026. That's when Ovechkin and Carlson come off the books. This is the last year under their current contracts, Ovi and Carlson. Their future is a bit ambiguous, a bit murky as well. Ovechkin, I could see hang it up. Carlson, he's another guy. If they cannot come to terms with Carlson, I think they would be better to deal him. I'm not here for a second to diminish what he did, but what I am saying is that if there is no master plan of him being here, or say he doesn't want here, I would rather get a return other than no return. That's where I'm at. So they're being very careful. They don't want to overcommit to long-term UFAs right now. They want players in the Dubois, Strome age range, guys who fit their core timeline, not guys that are just so green that they don't know how to play pro hockey. But Strome and Dubois, younger guys, established guys, guys that play very well. If you could duplicate Dubois and Stromes as far as forwards are concerned and something similar on the blue line, I think that is exactly what the Capitals are looking for. Again, I'm a bit bummed out to a very small extent that they didn't get that marquee name, but I am trying to take my plane way up in the sky, 30,000 foot view, and take a look over the Capitals organization. They don't need to do that. Would it be fun to see Marner in a Capitals jersey, a Marchand in a Capitals jersey? Sure. But at the end of the day, this team is built really well. And if they build, with tactful moves around the current roster, I think this team will be one to be reckoned with. And I look forward to proving the rest of the NHL wrong yet again. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.